Formula One just flipped its own season upside down, because the FIA is now pushing to bring back two races that were already cancelled. Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. Gone because of war, now suddenly returning, and threatening to turn the final part of the 2026 championship into complete chaos. Teams are under pressure. The calendar is being rewritten. And if this plan goes through, the title fight won't be decided by who was fastest all year, but by who survives what's coming next. Because this isn't just a comeback. It's a reset, right when everything is on the line. At first, it felt like a closed chapter. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia were out. Removed before the season could even settle, after a geopolitical conflict made racing in the region impossible to justify. And when that decision was made, it looked definitive. Clear. Final. The sport would move forward without them. But that wasn't the full reality. Because even in that moment, something didn't quite close completely. The language. Carefully chosen. Not permanently cancelled. Reprogrammable. Which meant one thing: those races were never truly gone. They were paused, waiting for the right conditions. And now, those conditions are starting to appear. Not perfect. Not fully stable. But just enough for the FIA to reopen the conversation. And that's where everything begins to shift. Because bringing these races back isn't just about adding 2 weekends to the calendar. It's about breaking the structure that every team has already built their season around. Think about it. Every race is planned months in advance. Travel routes, freight logistics, car development cycles, even driver preparation. Everything is timed. Everything is calculated. Now imagine that entire system being interrupted halfway through the year. 2 massive events suddenly re-entering the picture. And there's no empty space waiting for them. No easy slot. No simple solution. So now the calendar doesn't expand. It compresses. And that's where the real problem begins. Because the only place left to fit these races is toward the end. The most intense part of the season. The moment where championships are already under pressure. And instead of building toward a natural finale, everything starts stacking together. Race after race. Less time between events. Less time to recover. Less time to fix mistakes. And that changes the entire dynamic of the championship. Because now, it's not just about performance. It's about timing. When you win. When you struggle. When you make a mistake. Because in a compressed schedule, those moments don't stay isolated. They carry forward. Immediately. And that's what turns this situation into something much bigger than a calendar update. It becomes a completely different kind of challenge. One where the strongest team isn't just the fastest. It's the one that can survive the disruption and still perform when everything around them is changing. And this is where the situation stops being theoretical and starts hitting the teams directly. Because once those races move toward the end of the season, the pressure doesn't just increase. It multiplies. Think about what the final phase of a championship already looks like. Drivers fighting for every point. Teams pushing upgrades to the limit. Strategies becoming more aggressive. Now add extra races into that moment, and suddenly, everything becomes unstable. Because there is no longer a clean path to the finish. There is noise, chaos, uncertainty. And that affects every single decision. Because in a normal calendar, teams can recover from a bad weekend. Analyze the data. Fix the setup. Come back stronger. But in a compressed finale, that recovery time disappears. You make a mistake on Sunday? And by the time you understand it, you're already in the next race. No reset. No breathing space. Just pressure building on top of pressure. And that's where cracks begin to appear. Not big ones. Small ones. A slightly wrong setup. A miscalculated strategy. A pit stop that's half a second too slow. And normally, those are manageable. But here, they stack. One after another. Until they become impossible to ignore. But here's where it gets even more dangerous. Because this doesn't just affect decisions. It affects reliability. Cars are designed around a fixed number of races. Engine components. Gearboxes. Energy systems. All calculated to last a certain distance. Now add unexpected races into that equation. And suddenly, those limits are pushed further than planned. And when limits are pushed, failures appear. At the worst possible moment. In the middle of a title fight. With everything on the line. And that's where championships are lost. Not because a team was slower. But because something broke when it couldn't afford to. But here's the deeper layer. Because while teams are dealing with machines, drivers are dealing with something else. Fatigue. Not just physical. Mental. Emotional. Because racing at this level isn't just about skill. It's about clarity. Decision-making under pressure. And when races come one after another, with no pause, that clarity starts to fade. reactions slow down, judgment becomes less precise, and mistakes become more likely. And in Formula One, that's everything. Because one small mistake, at the wrong moment, can define an entire season. But here's the part that changes the entire narrative. Because this situation doesn't just create risk, it creates opportunity. For the teams that adapt faster, for the drivers who stay sharper, for the ones who don't break when everything else starts to. Because in a scenario like this, the championship isn't just about being the best. It's about being the most resilient, the most consistent, the most prepared for chaos. And that's why this potential return changes everything. Because it doesn't just extend the season. It transforms the final battle into something completely unpredictable, where the strongest don't always win. Only the ones who survive do. And now we reach the point where everything finally connects, because this isn't just about two races coming back. It's about what that return reveals. Because when the FIA opens the door for Bahrain and Saudi Arabia to re-enter the season, it's not just reacting to circumstances. It's sending a message. The calendar is no longer fixed. It's flexible. And that changes how Formula One operates at its core. Because for decades, teams have built their entire philosophy around certainty. A fixed number of races. A fixed structure. A predictable flow. Now, that certainty is gone. And when certainty disappears, strategy changes. Because teams are no longer just preparing for what they know. They're preparing for what might happen. More races. Less time. More pressure. And that creates a completely different environment. One where adaptability becomes more valuable than pure performance. Because the fastest car doesn't always win when the conditions keep shifting. The smartest team does. The one that reacts quicker. The one that adjusts faster. The one that doesn't rely on the plan, because the plan might not hold. But here's where it becomes even more critical. Because this shift doesn't just affect teams. It affects the entire identity of the sport. Because Formula One has always been about precision. About control. About eliminating uncertainty. Now, uncertainty is part of the game. And that changes how everything is experienced. For teams. For drivers. For fans. Because when the structure itself becomes unpredictable, the outcome becomes unpredictable too. And that's where the real transformation happens. Because this potential return doesn't just reshape the calendar. It reshapes the championship. It reshapes the pressure. It reshapes the way victory is achieved. And that leads to the final realization. If Bahrain and Saudi Arabia do come back, the 2026 season won't just be remembered for who won. It will be remembered for how it was won. A season interrupted. A calendar rewritten. A championship decided in conditions that didn't exist at the start. And in that kind of environment, the winner isn't just the fastest driver. It's the one who understands something deeper. That Formula One is no longer just about racing the track. It's about racing the chaos and finding control when there shouldn't be any. And this is where the story reaches its final turning point. Because once you understand everything behind this decision, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't just a reaction. It's a signal. A signal that Formula One is willing to change, in real time, even during a season. And that changes the meaning of everything we've seen so far. Because every result up to this point was built under one structure, one calendar, one expectation. But if that structure shifts, then the context of those results shifts with it. And suddenly, the early part of the season doesn't carry the same weight. Because what matters most hasn't happened yet. Everything is being pushed toward the end. Toward that final stretch. Where more races, more pressure, and more unpredictability collide at the same time. And that's where the championship will truly be decided. Not in the opening races. Not in the middle phase. But in that compressed, chaotic ending, where there is no margin left. But here's the part that defines everything. Because in a normal season, the best team builds its advantage early, and defends it. Here, that advantage is never safe. Because more races mean more exposure. More exposure means more chances for something to go wrong. And when something goes wrong, there is no time to recover. Only time to react. And that's the difference. Reaction. Because in this version of Formula One, the winner won't be the one who controls everything. It will be the one who responds the fastest, when control is lost. But here's the final layer. Because this situation doesn't just test performance. It tests belief. Belief inside the team. Belief inside the driver. Because when the structure changes around you, doubt appears. Is the plan still right? Is the setup still optimal? Is the approach still valid? And those questions, under pressure, can be just as dangerous as any mechanical failure. Because hesitation, even for a second, can cost everything. And that's why this ending could create something unforgettable. Because it won't just be about speed. It won't just be about strategy. It will be about who stays mentally intact when everything else starts to shift. And that leads to the final truth. If Bahrain and Saudi Arabia return, the 2026 championship won't be decided by who had the best car. It will be decided by who handled the chaos, the pressure, and the uncertainty better than anyone else. Because when the rules of the season change while you're living it, winning stops being about perfection and becomes about survival.